Welcome to the Holistic Living Podcast, my beautiful friends. You can expect my uncensored, real, and honest thoughts on a wide variety of health topics. If you love to learn on ways to improve your health, your life, your mindset, your emotions, and everything in between in a natural way, you are in the right place, and I am so excited to have you here. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 41 of the Holistic Living Podcast. I'm a bit sick and congested, so apologize ahead of time. Today I want to talk about dysbiosis because the most popular thing that I do with my clients and with my programs is focusing on gut health, and dysbiosis is one of the biggest parts of that, and I get a lot of questions around it. I'm going to share some crazy bombs of information, guys, relating to fibromyalgia and just so much that's going to blow your mind. This is going to be really important if you have joint health issues, if you have liver issues. Just keep listening because there's going to be little tidbits of information that I promise you have not heard anywhere else, okay? Remember, I live, eat, sleep, and breathe this. My whole practice for the almost past decade surrounds heavily on the gut and the liver. So I'm excited to be able to share some of this information with you. So the lower part of our small intestine and colon contain many microbes, mainly bacteria, that live in harmony with us. They are called symbionts because this is a mutually beneficial relationship for them and us. We obviously need them, they need us. Now the upper part of the small intestine also contains symbionts, but as one approaches the colon, the concentration increases. Okay, so the stomach doesn't contain any microbes at all. It shouldn't. The hydrochloric acid secreted in the stomach keeps it sterile because it's so acidic. In addition to the symbionts, there are also commensal microbes, which exist in a neutral sort of relationship with us. Now, they live off of the food in our gut, but they're neither harmful nor beneficial to us. This includes bacteria like E. coli and various streptococci and many others as well. Now, lastly, there are pathogenic bacteria, viruses, and parasites. These live off of the foods in our gut, and they are harmful to us, their host. These organisms do normally exist in the gut, but their numbers are kept low by the other two kinds of microbes. The normal level is from about 3% to 15%. And so pathogens will produce endotoxins, which the liver has to detoxify, and so they damage the tissues. If their numbers, these pathogenic numbers, are allowed to rise, the liver becomes really overburdened really quickly, and the toxins start circulating around the body, resulting in many symptoms. And this is known as auto-intoxication, which is a concept that was first formulated back in the early 1900s by Dr. Lane and Ellie. All right, so let's get into what is dysbiosis. So in dysbiosis, the balance of intestinal microbes is dominated by the more harmful organisms that produce a wide array of toxic chemicals as byproducts of their nutrient consumption. These will include vasoactive substances derived from protein putrefaction, free radicals, and carcinogenic substances. These toxins can be absorbed into the bloodstream and may cause local gut mucosa inflammation and irritation, with resultant mucus overproduction, increased mucosal permeability, aka leaky gut, and overburdening of the immune system. Now, before I move on, there have been so many studies that have linked things like Candida overgrowth to cancer. So we know that they are producing carcinogenic toxins, that they weaken our Th1 immune response, which is the part of our immune system that scans our body for viruses, pathogens, and cancer cells and clears them out. And so our body's pathogen and cancer surveillance gets weakened when we have chronic dysbiosis or pathogenic imbalance. We're going to get into a lot of things that are going to be depleting these good beneficial probiotics and promoting the bad pathogens shortly. But just to come back to the gut. So we have what's called the mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, also known as MALT. It is the largest group of immune tissues in the human body, and it consists of lymphocytes, plasma cells, and macrophages in the lamina propria of the gut. There's also Peyer's patches and the mesenteric lymph nodes of the digestive tract. Now, lymphocytes will produce immunoglobulin A or IgA, which forms a protective antiseptic layer covering the gut mucosa. We want good levels of IgA. IgA controls the absorption of antigens and toxins. Secretory IgA antigen complexes can inhibit, so prevent bacterial adhesion and invasion, and can inhibit the binding of antibodies like IgM and IgG to antigens, thus reducing the activation of the complement system and inflammation. So just to go into a little bit of detail on what I just said there, IgA, those antibodies actually prevent other antibodies like IgM and IgG from binding to tissues and producing antigens, which means if you have sufficient IgA production in the gut, your risk of having food allergies or sensitivities is greatly decreased, and your risk of developing like a zonulin issue from IgM, so leaky gut, is greatly decreased as well. Okay, so like I said here, the IgA will also decrease IgE binding to antigen and hence again inhibit allergy reactions. So it's so important to have a healthy gut. Symbionts work in harmony with this immune tissue, while pathogens will cause the tissue to react with inflammation. Ongoing chronic inflammation weakens the immune system and is associated with allergy reactions and autoimmune disease. Okay, so isolated aerobic dysbiosis causes relatively mild symptoms. Isolated anaerobic dysbiosis more frequently causes malabsorption and autointoxication. Now, the most common dysbiosis is a mix of aerobic and anaerobic infections. Aerobic pathogens will include the Enterobacter species. We've got the Proteus, vulgaris, the Klebsiella pneumoniae, Staph aureus, the Hemolyticus, so many others, okay? Streptococcus, etc. Anaerobic bacteria include the Propionibacteria, Clostridia, Fusobacteria, and Peptococci. So we usually have a mix of both. So gut symbionts and commensals number about 400 different species and add up to about 1.5 kilograms. They make up 30% to 50% of feces. So I say this all the time. When you have a bowel movement, this is going to get gross and sound gross for a second, but that stool, that log that comes out, at least 30 to 50% of it is dead microbes. It's not food, it's dead microbes, at least half of that, which is mind-blowing. If you have severe constipation and you're not getting healthy large stool coming out, it's because you don't have enough microbes. Partly. The symbionts include enterococci, lactobacilli, proteases, yeasts like Candida, Clostridia. The main ones in infants are Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium animalis, and the subspecies Lactis. In adults, they're Lactobacillus acidophilus and Bifidobacterium. So when you're taking a probiotic, especially if it's an adult probiotic, that's why the majority of the strains in there are typically Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium. All right, let's move on. Symbionts found in supplements or in fermented products are called probiotics. It's important to take those containing symbionts that are normally found in the gut. For example, the Lactobacillus bulgaricus or Streptococcus thermophilus and the Lactobacillus casei. These are frequently found in probiotics, but they'll never take hold in the gut because it's not their normal niche. They do provide some benefit. They'll produce those bacteriostatic chemicals that will inhibit pathogens in a transient manner as they pass through. Now, there is some controversy as to whether Bifidobacterium is found in adults. Jeffrey Bland graphically shows its persistence at about 1 billion per gram of feces right through to about 50 years of age when it starts dropping off. So the baby will get their first microbes from the mother in utero and then during childbirth. And breast milk will contain N-acetylglucosamine or NAG, and this supports these microbes' proliferation. So breastfed babies mainly have bifidus in their gut, 99%, but when they're weaned, the wider variety of symbionts develop. Now, before we move on, I want to stress something here because I get this question all the time and I know it might come up. When we're taking probiotics, I get the question, should we be doing soil-based? Should we be doing regular? I say always go human strain. And here's why. I've made a whole episode on this already, so go back through the podcast. But human strain probiotics, very briefly, These are the ones that our body is familiar with. These are the ones that are meant to reside and thrive in our pH and in our tissues, and our immune system allows to stay there. And so they're the ones that can actually build and grow their colonies. We need a healthy, quote unquote, army of probiotics in our gut. And so you have to be doing the lactobacillus, the bifidobacterium strains. A soil-based probiotic are beneficial, but they don't ever take hold in the gut. So after about 48 hours, they'll die off and they'll be pushed out through your stool. And so if you're only taking soil-based, you'll never build up your probiotic population in your gut. They give you benefits with digestion and inflammation as you take them, but only for those periods that they're alive in the gut, which is like 1 to 2 days. So you can take a soil-based organism and do that long-term, but at the same time, you should be doing seasonal dosing of human strain probiotics. All right, so let's get into the etiology. Now, this usually will fall into 2 camps. 1, you have the death of good microbes that will drive dysbiosis, or 2, you'll have the microbial overgrowth, which favors pathogens. Let's talk about the death of the microbes first. There are many causes. The biggest, that we'll see will be oral antibiotics, as these will kill off all gut microbes, good and bad. Antibiotics can be taken as a medication directly or indirectly, so topically or ingested as well. They can be go back a step. They can be ingested with animal products. Stock animals will get antibiotics in their feed because of their living conditions. So you're not just taking a medication of an antibiotic, but if you're consuming meat that is not antibiotic free, you're getting antibiotics through the animal protein. Also, we have intestinal upsets or episodes of diarrhea. These will flush out symbionts as well. The cause of the diarrhea could be pathogen or its toxin. It could be food contamination or food sensitivity or intolerance. Stress is a huge destroyer of our gut microbes because when we go through stress, we have because of the vagal nerve, this whole inflammatory reaction that takes place. Also, starvation kills off microbes because they also require food to survive. General illness will affect nutritional status, the immune system, and microbial levels. Consuming junk food, drugs, pollutants, tobacco, these will all wipe out beneficial probiotics. X-rays can all affect the growth of good microbes as well, which I know a lot of people don't know about. Alcohol, I have to touch on this. Alcohol is a disinfectant, right? So when we're consuming it, we're literally disinfecting our gut from the good stuff as well. Okay? It's not good. Alcohol should not be consumed, in my opinion, at least not as frequently as people do today. Chlorine in water is an antimicrobial and will kill gut microbes. So not just drinking tap water, although that's one of the worst things that we can do, but swimming in pools. I'm not saying don't go swimming. Okay, we're not trying to ruin the fun here, but just so you're aware, swimming in pools, if you're like an actual swimmer, if it's a sport that you partake in and compete with, you probably need major gut support because you're constantly ingesting water, accidentally even, but it's also absorbing into the bloodstream. So your liver is going to be very taxed and your gut's going to be very depleted. And then drugs like steroids can also kill off good bacteria. So diet plays a huge role, stress plays a huge role, lack of sleep, medications, chlorine, x-rays, etc. Now, microbial overgrowth that favors pathogens is another way that we can get dysbiosis. So usually the overgrowth is due to an imbalance between the volume of food that we consume and our digestive capacity. Remember, if you don't eat it, the microbes will, and their numbers will increase. The imbalance between the amount of food eaten and the digestive capacity could be the result of overeating. Or if you just do like what people do lately is like intermittent fast and then just have like one large meal a day. Sugars especially favor the growth of pathogenic microbes, so that could be an issue. A reduced capacity to digest even a normal volume of food due to the exhaustion of digestive enzyme secretion and an underactive stomach, and pancreatic exhaustion can be an issue. So it's not just, okay, I'm going to have one big meal a day, because that you're not going to be able to digest that quickly enough. So the microbes will, and that will feed them and then they'll grow. Or a lot of people who have a really taxed liver, an overwhelmed pancreas, an insufficient gallbladder, an underactive stomach, they're consuming food and they just cannot digest a lot of it because there's not enough enzymes. So of course, again, the pathogens will come in and digest. And a lot of times we see gas and bloating or distended abdomen or some kind of like gut symptom like gurgling, things like that. And when pathogens are breaking down our food, they're fermenting it, and that's where the gas production will occur. So it can cause some symptoms like that as well. Now, I talked about this already, but stress shuts down the digestion and it leaves the food in the gut for the microbes to digest. So the stress could be a stressful lifestyle, stimulants like caffeine, hypoglycemic episodes, or chronic inflammation. Stress decreases enzyme and mucus secretions. So it's not just, oh, I'm stressed, I have a tough life, or oh, I'm stressed, I've got a busy life. Just having chronic inflammation activates our stress response, a cortisol reaction, and this will decrease enzyme and mucosal secretions because our body goes into a sympathetic nervous system state, which is that fight or flight, where blood is taken away from our digestive system and sent to our extremities for the fight or flight response. Now, drugs like steroids can also promote the growth of pathogenic organisms. Plus, if we're consuming literally a lot of sushi, undercooked meats, we're contracting a ton of parasites through that. No question, no doubt, they're there. If you put them under a microscope, you will see parasites in most of the food that we're consuming these days, especially if they're undercooked. So those are able to take hold in our gut. If we have an underactive stomach, that's another way that microbes can overgrow. Because again, when we consume food, say you went to the grocery store and you grabbed an apple off the shelf and you didn't really wash it well and you ate it, whoever touched that apple before you transferred microbes, and probably a lot of them are not nice ones. And if you have an underactive stomach, you're not killing a lot of those microbes, so they're going to hit your colon and start to take hold. Most of us have an underactive stomach because we have thyroid issues, we have constant stress, we're overeating, this, that, and the next. And so a lot of pathogens which should be dying in that super acidic stomach are not, because the stomach does not have enough acid. So there's so many ways, but those are some of the many ways that you can have overgrowth come about. Okay, so you have some of the first ways we talked about are when the good microbes die from antibiotics and things like that, and alcohol and chlorine and x-rays. Those kill off the good microbes, and then the bad get to just overgrow because there's not enough good to keep them in check. And then the other way is when the bad overgrow because we're doing something that's favoring them, eating one big meal a day and we're providing them a fuel source, we're having too much sugar, we're taking different drugs or steroids, we're stressed out, have an underactive stomach, eating undercooked meats, sushis, things like that, and the list goes on. So what are the signs and symptoms of dysbiosis? There are honestly hundreds. I've made a blog post on this listing tons, and it wasn't even a full conclusive list. There's so much, okay? And they're different for everyone, but here's a few, okay, very common ones. So the signs and symptoms of dysbiosis will vary. They're dependent upon the type of pathogenic organism that's involved and the area of the body in which the dysbiosis exists. But some common signs and symptoms include craving sugar and sweets, constipation, diarrhea, bloating, gas, abdominal pain, fatigue, itchy skin or skin rashes, feeling vaguely unwell in the absence of other health conditions, recurrent or frequent vaginal, prostate, or urinary tract infections, feeling spaced out or have difficulty with memory or concentration, so like a brain fog, hormonal disturbances like PMS, menstrual irregularities, or sexual dysfunction. We also have sleep issues, insomnia. You can end up having like high histamine, seasonal allergies, frequent runny nose, excess earwax, itchy anus. The list is forever. It can keep going. Okay. There's so many symptoms: dry, flaky skin, cracks around the mouth, bleeding lips, white coated tongue, cavities, a lot of plaque production. So there's so many symptoms around pathogens and their overgrowth. The growing number of pathogens produces toxins, which irritates the mucosa, and low-grade chronic inflammation can set in. So healthy intestinal mucosal cells rely on essential nutrients produced by the beneficial microorganisms, and without these nutrients, the mucosal cells atrophy or die. As a result of the atrophied mucosal cells, the chronic inflammation, the gut, becomes leaky, and then excess mucus, what we call digestive catarrh, interferes with absorption and the release of the disaccharides from the microvilli, which are like those little tiny finger-like projections in the gut. And so that intolerance to disaccharides and polysaccharides like grains, which are broken down to maltose, will increase. So this is how we can get, when people say I'm so sensitive to carbs, every time I eat carbs, I get acne, I get bumps on the skin, I get this and that. It's coming back down to the gut. Candida is the biggest opportunist, and hyphae can penetrate the mucosa, increasing its leakiness and enabling the fungus to spread all throughout the body. I want to give you a picture here. I have it on my office wall, so my in-person clients have seen it. But you have these yeast, these candida, and they kind of come in
and every time you're eating carbs or feeding off of it, they dig like these long little arms and tear apart the gut lining and those gap junctions. And then they can get into the bloodstream and pass to any part of the body. They can go to the vaginal tract, the urinary tract, wherever. You can get toenail fungus, you can get recurring yeast infections, urinary tract infections, and so many other symptoms, fungus on the skin, whatever it is, because they've become systemic. They can get to the oral cavities as well and cause issues there. The leaky gut allows partially digested foods, especially proteins, to be absorbed into the blood, and usually the tight junctions between mucosal cells do not allow this. But in the case of leaky gut, this happens. So the immune system will respond to these allergens and food sensitivity results. And if the immune system is continually called upon to handle the dysbiosis, it becomes weakened and hyperreactive, leading to frequent infections, autoimmune disease, asthma, and cancer. These have been proven through studies. This isn't a holistic opinion. These have been proven and confirmed that a dysregulated immune system will form into those frequent infections, autoimmune, asthma, cancer. It comes back to the fact that your immune system does cancer surveillance. If it's not rested, if it's constantly working, it becomes weakened and dysfunctional, and it no longer will have adequate cancer surveillance. And you end up with high levels of inflammation, high levels of toxicity, and that all favors cancer growth. Chronic inflammation of the mucosa causes the body to release cortisol, the body's anti-inflammatory hormone, from the adrenal gland. This exhausts the adrenal glands, and it also suppresses the immune system, which is how cortisone, when people take like a cortisone cream, works, further compromising that system. And this is how also direct stress and chronic inflammation cause a weakened immune system, is of that production of cortisone, and this is where production of cortisol, and this is where you're having that suppression. Cortisol is not only an anti-inflammatory hormone, it's also a stress hormone. So one thing common to all stress hormones is that they mobilize fuel sources for gluconeogenesis, because the body knows it needs energy in the form of blood glucose to fight or run when under stress. The cortisol mobilizes lean body mass, thus decreasing strength, muscular support of the skeleton, and the basal metabolic rate drops because it is linked to the amount of muscle on the body. It also mobilizes protein from bone, leading to bone thinning. The elevated blood sugar upsets normal blood glucose balance, and part of it is converted to cholesterol and triglycerides by the liver. So, hey, we can get high LDL. It then gets deposited as truncal adiposity and causes blood cholesterol levels to rise. So the sugar is very bioactive, creating many free radicals that can damage blood vessel endothelia and set atherosclerosis in motion. When people tell me I'm thin, I'm this, I'm that, there's no way I have high cholesterol, I literally say to them, if you have stress or chronic inflammation, you have cholesterol, period, because it comes back to the liver and how the body has to metabolize everything. The net effect is an increased susceptibility to developing type 2 diabetes and heart disease, referred to as the increased allostatic load of cortisol release. And this comes back to the gut, guys. Many toxins and even the bacteria themselves are absorbed and carried via the hepatic portal vein to the liver. The liver detoxification system becomes overloaded, and the toxins produced, including acetaldehyde, formaldehyde, skatol, indole, phenol, alcohol, ammonia, putrescine, and cadaverine. All of these are produced, okay? And they'll go to the liver. They're going to create a ton of toxicity in the liver. The liver is going to become malfunction, and you're going to have a backup and buildup of toxins in the body that's going to skyrocket your inflammation and drive disease. I first of all recommend people take probiotics because the benefits are endless, and scientists keep discovering more and more each day about them. Some of the known benefits already include that they produce antimicrobial substances like organic acids, hydrogen peroxide, and bacteriocins that inhibit pathogen adhesion to the mucosa and degrade toxins produced by microbial invaders, which is so important. They competitively inhibit pathogens by vying for space and nutrients. They provide lactase for lactose breakdown. They metabolize cholesterol, preventing its reabsorption and thereby lowering blood levels. So anyone who has high cholesterol has to be on a high-dose probiotic and liver support. They manufacture vitamins B3, B5, B6, and B12, biotin, folic acid, and vitamin K. They have anti-cancer effects because they inhibit bacteria that convert nitrates to nitrites, which produces carcinogenic nitrosamines. And so many people are consuming like processed meats and sausages and all kinds of things that have added nitrates to them, which is not good. Probiotics can also break down toxins and hence aid in the detoxification of many substances, including drugs. They produce lactic acid, which stimulates peristalsis. They enhance bowel function and elimination. They bulk up the stool. They normalize bowel movements. They can reverse diarrhea associated with IBS, Crohn's disease, and ulcerative colitis. They stimulate IgA protection, which we all need in the gut, thus reducing microbial invasion and reducing immune response to antigens. And they prevent and decrease inflammation. They maintain a pH that is mildly acid, which prevents the more pathogenic alkaline-loving microbes from growing, like Salmonella, Shigella, E. coli, yeast, and so on. And the sulfide gas-producing organisms as well, which like a pH of like 7.2 to 7.3. They decrease acne and other skin problems. They decrease halitosis, which is bad breath. They produce butyric acid, which is one of the short-chain fatty acids or volatile fatty acids that are used by the gut mucosa as a form of nourishment. And the list goes on, okay? There's so many benefits, and those are just some of the many that have been proven by scientific research. So liver function and dysbiosis is something that I want to tie together really quickly. This is what I focus heavily on in my practice because of the strong connection. So the liver has many functions to perform. And so overloading one function, such as that of detoxification, compromises and reduces the efficiency of its other functions. In particular, the liver performs every possible permutation of biological oxidation and ATP formation. It breaks down and builds up glycogen, fats, and proteins, and can form glucose from other fuel stores. If we're compromising this function, it's going to result in fatigue and shortages or excesses of various fuels. The liver's ability to prepare the body to meet its requirements will be lost. And another thing is that the liver responds to pancreatic insulin and glucagon to control the blood glucose within a normal range. An overloaded liver typically starts to respond sluggishly to pancreatic signals, and so hyperglycemia, hypoglycemia, and general blood sugar instability will result. You might start feeling dizzy, lightheaded, needing food frequently, needing carbs. The many synthetic pathways of the liver are affected, including the formation of blood lipoproteins, LDL, VLDL, and HDL. Blood proteins like albumin and fibrinogen and very many blood carrier proteins, including active vitamin D and so on, are also affected. This affects many functions like calcium absorption, bone density, water balance, clotting, and free versus bound ratios of minerals and hormones circulating in the blood. The liver is also the primary excretory organ for many of the hormones, including thyroid and steroid hormones. I talk about this all the time. The one thing that the liver is so important for is that it conjugates these hormones and secretes them with the bile into the duodenum of the gut to where they are eliminated from the body. Hormonal imbalances result if the liver stops doing this efficiently. If the liver is unable to detoxify absorbed toxic products from the gut or those circulating in the blood, it can secrete them in an active form along with bile into the common hepatic duct, and they will accumulate in the gallbladder, irritating and possibly inflaming this organ, and can even cause stones to build up and form. The liver eliminates many drugs from the body. A reduced efficiency will affect drug dosages and lead to prolonged drug half-lives. This has relevance particularly with anesthetics that are administered. The liver will conjugate and excrete bilirubin. A slow liver may not maintain an efficient process of taking bilirubin out of circulation and moving it into bile. So the conjugated and unconjugated bilirubin may rise in the blood. You can see this in pregnancy as cholestasis, very itchy skin. Conjugated bilirubin excreted by the kidneys makes the urine dark, and people with overloaded livers often have dark urine, especially first thing in the morning. The liver has macrophagic Kupffer cells and is part of the reticuloendothelial system that contributes to immunity. So an overloaded liver, therefore, also impacts the immune system, and allergic inflammation could become worse. An overloaded liver strains other portals of elimination like the kidneys, lungs, and skin. And the skin has acne, blotches, and eczema. This usually indicates that there's liver toxicity. The lungs will become more irritable. The presence of toxins in the blood and lymphatics causes swollen lymph nodes, repeated sore throats, and recurring middle ear infections. Overall, the immune system is weakened. So let's move on to Candida. Now that we see how the liver can be affected, and these are just a few of the many ways. I could make this podcast 10 hours long just to talk about the liver issues that we get from toxicity. But let's move into Candida. Candida produces estrogen-like substances and can contribute to a common condition called estrogen dominance. This is a situation where the effective estrogen in the body is not balanced by progesterone. The effect of unstopped estrogens is to stimulate growth of such things as cysts, fibroids, and tumors. It is associated with fibrocystic breasts, fibroadenomas of the breast, endometriosis, ovarian and uterine cysts, breast cancer, and cancer generally in both men and women. In men, it contributes to benign prostatic enlargement. Candida floods the system with acetaldehyde, which poisons the nervous system, joints, and muscles, and it acts as a mitochondrial poison. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to say that again. Candida floods the system with acetaldehyde, which poisons the nervous system, joints, and muscles, and it acts as a mitochondrial poison. So acetaldehyde destroys the nervous system. It actually damages the brain. It can cause all kinds of nervous system issues. More importantly, it gets absorbed and stored in our cells, in the mitochondria of our cell, which is the power or energy center of our cells, where your cells will take up glucose, burn it up as fuel in the mitochondria of the cell, and then give you that energy to get through your day. Well, when this mitochondria is poisoned, it's not uptaking the glucose with the insulin and burning it up as fuel as quickly as it should be. So what's happening instead? You are storing it as fat. You're storing the glucose as fat because it cannot be burned up as quickly as it should be. So not only will you have fatigue, but you will start to have weight gain and find it very easy to gain weight and difficult to lose weight, especially around the abdomen. So that's one thing that Candida can do. Research in the US has found that nearly half of those with severe fibromyalgia have high urinary levels of tartaric acid, which is a metabolite of Candida. Okay, so nearly half of those with severe fibromyalgia have high urinary levels of a Candida metabolite. Kind of crazy. Acetaldehyde can affect metabolic, endocrine, and immune system function, and it may interfere with the receptors for acetylcholine, which is the neurotransmitter associated with memory, motor, and autonomic function. It also stimulates histamine release and so makes allergy and inflammation worse. Aldehyde oxidase breaks down acetaldehyde. This enzyme requires vitamin B2, iron, and molybdenum. A good sign of acetaldehyde excess is sensitivity to fragrances and smells, which I know myself has and so many people. Alcohol can make the symptoms of candidiasis worse because it also is broken down to acetaldehyde. So if you drink alcohol and you get worse, or if you're sensitive to fragrances and smells, most likely you have Candida. Candida grows in colder, wetter climates and cannot thrive in hot, dry climates. Hence, it tends to grow more in winter. People who live in hotter climates often find when they migrate to colder, wetter climates, they start developing symptoms like allergies and headaches and other conditions like asthma get worse. This is because the colder, wetter climate has exacerbated the dysbiosis. It is also easier to eat sweeter fruits and a higher carb diet in the hotter climates. However, the same diet will feed the yeast in the new, colder climates and become a problem. This is another reason to steer clear of sweeter foods in winter. So before I move on, you can have a cold, wet climate in your body too. So we're not just talking about outside, but we're talking about if you naturally eat cold foods, if you're naturally consuming like yogurts and things that are going to cause, and sugars and carbs that are going to cause dampness and mucus production in the body, that is the perfect foods to eat if you want Candida to grow, because you're creating that damp, cold environment internally for them. And then again, in the summer, you're drinking more alcohol, you're out, you're eating more fruits and sugars. So it feeds the yeast and then it flares up in the winter when the climate aligns with it as well. All right, so let's move on. We want to look at and talk about protein putrefaction as an indicator of pathogens. So the amino acid ornithine is converted to putrescine, lysine to cadaverine, and tyrosine to tyramine, and phenyltryptophan to scatol and indole, and histidine to histamine by the pathogens in the gastrointestinal tract. These toxins are absorbed and their esters are excreted in the urine. They can therefore be measured in the urine as an indication of presence of pathogens and of a failure to digest proteins. So indole appearing as indican in the urine in increased amounts indicates putrefaction. So to test, you can take a 25 ml sample of urine and add 10% lead acetate, and then filter and decant 10 mils. And then you're going to add the 10 mil of the ferric iron chloride. So there's a whole process that they'll do in a lab to get to the result of whether or not you have a difficulty with breaking down the protein. And then if that indicates the presence of pathogens. Now, not all labs will do this, so you'll have to do some research, but some will go through this whole process to get that answer for you. So what do we do? Well, cleansing has to be done first. You need to do a dysbiosis protocol before you can do anything else. And you need to do a liver drainage and detox at the same time, because the protocol is going to kill off gut pathogens. And this is going to help with reducing the overall toxic burden on the body, help the immune system recover, and so much more in the gut to repair. But you can't just jump into a pathogen cleanse. You need to first start with some liver and kidney elimination. You want to start with getting the gut prepared, get things opening up, like the elimination channels in the body to open up a little bit. Because if you were to just jump into a pathogen cleanse and start killing things off, they're going to secrete a ton of toxins, and the liver and the drainage organs are going to have to be able to handle them. And if they can't do that, they're already depleted and overloaded. They're just, the toxins are just going to be passing through your vital organs, causing inflammation and damage, and then they'll just redeposit. So they're going to cause a problem for you and then end up staying in the body anyway. And now you're just even unhealthier and more depleted than before. So you want to go ahead and do a proper detoxification protocol. Now, my 60-day gut reset program starts off with the liver and kidney drainage. We start opening up the lymphatic and those other pathways. We start preparing the gut and eliminating gently through the gut before a pathogen cleanse is done. So this gets your gut reset and ready to go and cleaned out and de-inflamed, so your body can then fully handle a pathogen cleanse. So you can click the link in the description of the podcast episode to the 60-day gut reset. We have $200 off right now. The code is secret offer. It's the biggest discount we've ever done, and it's ending soon. So take advantage of it. It's the 60daygutreset.com. Okay. It's a 60-day program or a 10-week program. So I'm really proud of that, but that's what I recommend is you need to do liver and kidney cleanse. You need to start clearing up pathogens. People underestimate the damage that can happen by having some microbes in the gut. It's so important to really think about that. So, fasting is another great thing that we can do. It's harder to do when you have blood sugar issues, when you have hormonal issues, but if you are healthy and you don't have those imbalances, fasting can be really beneficial to do. You can do like a true fast, like just water fasting. There's so many things. But either way, it's just really important to be aware of how the imbalance in our gut can literally create and be the start of all disease. And like the father of medicine said, Hippocrates, all disease begins in the gut. And I 100% believe that. It's the epicenter of our health, and it's the first thing that can become out of balance when we live in this modern world with high stress, horrible diets, poor sleep, a ton of medications, and everything else. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me through social media. Have an awesome day. I hope you have a beautiful day or night wherever you are listening from, and I will talk to you in the next episode.